Welcome to today's deep dive. I am so glad you were joining us because today we are looking at something you interact with literally every single second of the day, probably without even realizing it.
Yeah, it is entirely invisible to most of us.
Exactly. We are talking about culture, but we are moving way past the surface level tourist view of culture.
Right, no travel brochure stuff today.
No travel brochures. The mission for this deep dive is to uncover the invisible forces, the values, the unspoken language cues, the communication styles that actually shape how we live and how we think.
Because it really is the foundation of everything we do.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Hmm.
Imagine you are sitting on a crowded subway train in Tokyo
Okay.
and your phone rings. Now, if you were in New York or London, you would probably just answer it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you might lower your voice a bit, but you are taking that call.
Right. But if you do that in Tokyo, you aren't just being mildly annoying. You are committing the social equivalent of setting off a fire alarm. The whole car feels it.
They absolutely do. And what's truly fascinating is how our source material reveals that culture isn't just what we do. It is the literal lens through which we view reality itself.
Right.
We tend to think of our own social rules as if they're just basic laws of physics. Like, of course you answer the phone. That's just what people do.
But it feels like the default human setting.
Exactly. But the texts we are diving into today strip away those superficial layers. You know, the things we usually call culture.
Like the food, the clothing, the colorful festivals.
Yeah, exactly. Those are just the visible artifacts. The real culture is the foundational code dictating what registers in your brain as polite or aggressive or totally bizarre.
Reading through the notes for this deep dive, I actually kept thinking about this whole concept in terms of technology, like a smartphone.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, think about it. The food, the traditional clothes, the holidays, those are the apps on the home screen.
Right, the stuff you can see and interact with.
Exactly. They're brightly colored, they're obvious. But underneath all of those apps is the operating system.
The OS running quietly in the background.
Yes, the invisible values and beliefs. The source text talks about how some cultures heavily value independence and personal freedom, right?
Yes, individualistic culture.
And then others prioritize the family or the community above the individual. Collectivist cultures. So to me, individualism or collectivism, those are the operating systems.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And what's fascinating here is that we are completely blind to our own operating system until we encounter a different one.
We don't even know it's running.
We really don't. We just assume everyone else has the same software installed. And the text makes a crucial point here, which is that neither system is inherently right or wrong.
Right, the sources are very clear on that. No
Yeah.
judgment either way.
Exactly. They are just different, highly evolved mechanisms for organizing human survival and cooperation. But if you try to open an app built for a collective operating system on an individualistic phone,
The whole thing crashes.
the whole thing crashes.
Which brings us right back to that subway train in Tokyo.
Yes, the classic example of a culture running an operating system that prioritizes social harmony and respect for the collective over individual expression.
So the quiet on the train isn't just a rule posted on a sign.
No, not at all. It is a physical manifestation of a very deep belief. The belief that your individual desire, wanting to take a phone call, is just objectively less important than the collective piece of that shared space.
You are actively minimizing your footprint to maintain the group's equilibrium.
Precisely. And then contrast that with the Western countries the text analyzes.
Right, where the operating system heavily favors directness.
Yes. In a Western environment, suppressing your personal thoughts or your desires just to keep the group happy is often viewed as a negative thing.
Yeah, it can be seen as inauthentic, or like you are hiding something.
Exactly. People are expected to voice their opinions, to debate things openly, and to advocate for themselves, even if it causes a little friction in the room.
So what does this all mean for how we actually interact? I mean, does the Western approach essentially prioritize individual truth while the Japanese approach prioritizes social peace?
That is a really great distillation of what the text is arguing. Yes.
Because if I am running the individual truth software, I am going to view a direct, blunt argument as a productive way to solve a problem.
Of course. You are just being honest.
Right. But if I bring that exact same behavior into a boardroom that is running the social peace software,
You are going to break the room.
I am. I'm not just being slightly rude. I'm actively destroying the functional fabric of that meeting. My honesty just registers to them as chaotic aggression.
And you have just identified the exact mechanism of cross-cultural misunderstanding. The intent just does not translate.
It's wild to think about.
It is, and the source text spends a lot of time dissecting this because it really is the root of so much global friction. These are simply different tools for navigating society based on what that culture values most. You cannot judge one operating system using the metrics of another.
Like trying to use a thermometer to measure how heavy something is.
Exactly. It just doesn't work.
Okay, so if these underlying frameworks dictate everything from how we run a boardroom to how we ride the bus, we have to talk about how the software actually gets installed.
The installation process, right, because
Right.
nobody is born with this stuff hardwired.
Exactly. A baby doesn't know anything about social harmony or individual truth. And this is where the source texts bring us back to those surface-level apps we mentioned earlier.
The food and the festivals.
Yes. But here's where it gets really interesting. The text reframes them completely. It argues that a festival like Diwali in India or the Lunar New Year or Christmas in Western cultures, they are not just parties.
No, they are highly engineered mechanisms.
They are cultural classrooms.
Yeah.
That's how I read it.
That is a great way to put it. They are the tangible carriers of culture. Because abstract concepts like respect for elders or community bonds, those are really hard to teach to a child in a vacuum.
Right, you can't just hand a 5-year-old a textbook on social harmony.
You can't. So cultures solve this problem through ritual, through
Yeah.
shared physical experiences. The text uses Italian cuisine as a really prime example of this.
Oh yeah, the traditional multi-course Sunday dinner.
Right. The source points out that this meal isn't really about the nutritional value of the pasta or the pizza.
Obviously not.
It is a physical, repetitive enactment of family life. It reinforces the hierarchy, the traditions, and the community bonds.
It's like the food is just the bait.
The baits.
Yeah, the food gets everyone to the table, but the real meal is the shared identity.
I love that.
Because when a family sits down and goes through the choreography of that meal, who serves whom, who speaks when, the recipes that have been passed down, they are physically syncing their behavior.
They are.
The older generation is basically downloading the cultural operating system into the younger generation,
Yeah.
but they are doing it through this joyous sensory experience.
Right. The smell of the food, the warmth of the room. It encodes those abstract values into long-term memory. It makes the abstract physical.
And without those physical carriers, what happens?
Well, the sources emphasize that without these rituals acting as social glue, the overarching values of a culture would eventually just evaporate.
They need the repetition.
Exactly. Sharing a meal or celebrating a holiday takes this invisible history and transforms it into a lived reality that everyone experiences at the exact same time.
Okay, but that creates a fascinating paradox, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if these cultural classrooms are so incredibly effective at installing the software, and we spend our whole lives surrounded by people running the exact same code, we just become completely blind to it.
Oh, absolutely. We lose the ability to see the water we are swimming in.
Right. So we need some kind of external shock to realize we're even operating within a framework.
And that is where the texts shift focus to language and travel.
Yes, language as a mirror and a window.
The material treats language not just as a system for swapping out vocabulary words, but as the actual architecture of thought.
Which is a heavy concept.
It is. Learning a new language means learning a completely new way to perceive reality.
It makes me think of tinted glasses. If you have been wearing blue tinted glasses since the day you were born, you don't know the world has a blue tint. You just think the sky and the trees and everything is blue.
That is exactly it. And the text uses a brilliant example to prove this point, focusing on family dynamics.
Oh, the words for aunts and uncles.
Yes. In English, we just have the generic words uncle and aunt. But the text points out that in certain other languages, those generic words don't even exist.
Wait, really? No word for just uncle?
No. Instead, they have highly specific words. There is a distinct word for your mother's older brother, a completely different word for your mother's younger brother, another one for your father's older brother, and so on.
That is wild.
Ugh.
But it makes total sense when you tie it back to the operating system.
Exactly, because the necessity of those specific words proves how central that nuanced family hierarchy is to that culture.
Right, if an older uncle commands a different level of respect than a younger uncle, the language has to evolve to accommodate that rule.
If you don't have the specific word for the relationship, the boundary of that relationship gets blurred. So by studying the vocabulary a culture prioritizes, you are literally reading the source code of what matters most to them.
And when you try to learn that language, You can't speak it accurately without adapting that perspective. You are forced to acknowledge the hierarchy.
Precisely. Which leads directly to the second method the text points to for breaking out of our own matrix, which is travel.
But the text frames travel in a very specific way, not as a way to go see new things, but as a way to see yourself.
Right. It acts as a mirror. Encountering a totally foreign concept of normal is often the only way to recognize the artificiality of your own normal.
It's like realizing you have an accent,
Yeah.
because nobody thinks they have an accent when they're just sitting in their hometown talking to their neighbors.
Of course not. You sound normal to you.
Right. You only hear your own accent when you travel somewhere else and suddenly realize, oh, wait, my pronunciation is the weird one here.
And it is the exact same thing with culture. When you travel and experience the shock of someone else's daily routine, it illuminates all the invisible rules you have been following blindly.
You suddenly realize that shaking hands or making direct eye contact, or even the concept of personal space, those aren't universal human traits. They are hyper-specific local customs.
And that realization, according to the source material, is the catalyst for genuine open-mindedness.
Because it replaces judgment with curiosity.
Exactly. Once you accept that your way of doing things is simply one option among thousands, the instinct to judge a foreign culture as wrong just dissolves. You start wondering why their operating system developed that way and what advantages it might actually have.
Okay, I am tracking with all of that, but I do want to play devil's advocate for a second regarding where the source material takes this next.
Go for it.
So the text spent all this time celebrating these distinct, beautiful differences, the nuanced words for family, the localized festivals, the different ways we communicate.
Right.
But then it pivots to the modern globalized world. It talks about how technology and the internet and hyper-frequent travel are mixing all these cultures together at lightning speed.
They are.
And the text frames this entirely as a positive evolution. But if technology and travel are mixing cultures so rapidly, aren't we at risk of losing those distinct differences?
That is a very common concern.
Because if we are all connected, consuming the same global media, communicating instantly across borders, don't we eventually just merge into one gray, uniform megaculture? Do we lose the distinct accents the text is telling us to value?
That friction between globalization and cultural preservation is a massive debate. But if we connect this to the bigger picture the sources are painting, they take a deliberately optimistic stance here.
Okay, how do they justify that?
Well, the material argues that globalization does not necessarily equal homogenization. It doesn't view globalization as a giant blender that just reduces everything to a uniform paste.
Okay, that is a relief.
Right. Instead, it views this hyperconnectivity as an incredible opportunity to develop cross-cultural fluency.
Okay. So the argument is that we aren't deleting our original operating systems to install a universal one. We are just downloading translation software.
That is exactly it. Downloading translation software. The texts assert that exposure to global cultures doesn't erase your local identity, it expands your toolkit.
So if I am raised in a highly individualistic culture and I learn how to navigate a collective culture, I don't lose my individualism.
No, you don't. You just gain the ability to understand a totally different set of human motivations. The source material frames this cultural mixing as something that makes the global community significantly more resilient and colorful.
Because we are exposed to thousands of different ways of solving problems.
Exactly. The ultimate goal isn't for everyone to act the same. The goal is for everyone to understand the underlying intent behind different actions.
Right. So if I understand that a colleague's blunt feedback is just a cultural marker of honesty and not a personal attack on me,
Your emotional reaction completely changes.
it does. Or if I know that another colleague's silence in a meeting is actually a gesture of respect, rather than them just being disengaged.
Yes, the surface behavior is still different, but the mutual understanding prevents the social crash.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that cross-cultural fluency is really the core takeaway of these texts, the ability to look past the superficial friction and engage with the deeper values at play. The material suggests that stepping outside of your comfort zone, whether that is through language learning or travel or just sharing a meal with a different community in your own city, it is not just some academic exercise.
It is a fundamental requirement for navigating the modern world.
Absolutely.
Wow. We started this deep dive by comparing culture to invisible forces, like gravity or a Wi-Fi signal. It really is the overarching architecture of our lives.
It is everywhere.
It is baked into the food we eat, it is hidden in the vocabulary we use to describe our own families, and it dictates the invisible boundaries of politeness on a subway train. It determines if we see ourselves as independent agents or as integral pieces of a larger community.
And by taking the time to actually examine these hidden frameworks, we gain a superpower, really. We gain the ability to step back from our own automatic reactions.
We stop assuming our programming is the only truth.
Exactly. We learn to read the source code of the societies around us, and that replaces our initial judgment with a much deeper structural appreciation.
It completely flips the script on how you view your own life. So for you listening, the next time you find yourself entirely baffled by how someone from another background is acting, just remember that they are likely running a different, perfectly valid operating system.
Keep that translation software running.
Exactly. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question about your own programming to ponder. Think about your routine from the moment you woke up this morning. What is one completely normal habit or one deeply ingrained rule of politeness you follow every single day without a second thought that might look utterly bizarre to someone visiting from the other side of the world? Keep looking for those invisible forces. Until next time.